a minute, and Ryan can come up here for a minute, please. The Tiger Team is the transportation intern program that we've worked with Cal State Northridge. There's always been a gap between those that want to get to work for the professional community, and I have good news that I heard my friend Arnold said that one of our former interns is now working for the San Francisco office of ARIP, if I know that that's true. So it's now public. So you know, there's people here that you need to know in the future, those that are looking for future interns, like Ezekiel, who's just starting his engineering career. But you know, I've already known that he's a guy that somebody here wants to capture by the time he's 18. So that's, you know, we look for the talent early because we need people to, you know, I'm getting really old. Roderick is probably, you know, got another 20 years to do this, but you know, somebody's got to take over and see if we can ever get the rail line to the airport in 20 years. You know, maybe he's still working on that. Maybe, but maybe not. So what's going on with the Tiger Team is that anybody who wants one of these, I have some. I probably don't have enough for the room, but this describes a lot of the different work that the Tiger Team works on. We work on everything from just urban issues, like we have issues like where there's no bus stops because the Council District 7 never thought about putting in streets, landing pads, or curbs and all, and we have guide dogs for the blind, and gee, it's been 20 years and nobody's actually done anything. So we actually produced letters, sent it off to the mayor's office, and we got something back from Council Member Alarcon's office after 2 months of no response, asking did I know anybody over at Metro that could figure out how to find a pot of money to fund sidewalks? And it's like, guys, most council districts actually know how to do this, except for Alarcon's. But you know, it just means that we've got interns coming in from political science interns, and they're going to get taught to how to visit council office, and we've got all sorts of letters of support coming in just because it's really kind of sad that they haven't thought of putting in sidewalks so the blind can use the bus up in Zelmer. We're working on other things, including train and bus connections. We have done research. We found out that if you took a Metrolink train to Sylmar and wanted to take a bus to get you to your job, you have about a 10% chance to actually catch a bus within 10 minutes and an 85% chance of 15 to 45 to 55 minutes. So Metro hasn't fixed the buses, and it's the same in the other direction, leaving your job to get to the train. We'll just get there a minute after the train's left. Just very unfortunate. So we have a lot of projects, but one of the things that our latest pride and joy is the new Transit Coalition blog. And our social media director is Ryan Holman, who's probably tweeting this meeting. So if anybody wants to get logged into Transit Coalition in our blog, our tweet, it's just transit_CO, and you can get all the latest and greatest, and that's the, hi, how are you? In addition to that, Kevin Kay is the gentleman that's designed all of these various brochures, and if you have your design concept, he's designing some graphics for the blog. We decided we would get the blog out into the street first, and then we're working on different designs. So if you brought your designs, then we could show the room. So Kevin is our designer. So, and once we show that, so just so you know, the Transit Coalition is a nonprofit. We deal with transportation advocacy, land use planning, and goods movement, and to keep these projects. Today is part 2 of our movement of how you get transit to airports. Last month we talked about transit to Bob Hope Airport, which actually has a train within a 7-minute walk of the terminals. And then we have Los Angeles World Airports, which has roughly 47,000 or 57,000 people with badges that work at the airport. And transit isn't exactly simple. I mean, one of the things we visualize is what if Metrolink actually got in early enough in the morning, like 4:30 or 5 a.m. in the morning, because Los Angeles World Airports has 24-hour bus service from Union Station here. However, those buses can take the early morning workers. There's lots of workers at World Airports that go to work at 5, 5:30, and 6 their shift starts. It's hard to take a bus from Gateway here when the first trains get in at 5:45 or 6 if you want to be on your early shift, or if you get off at a midday shift 2 or 3. So those are some changes that need to be done. And then one of the other pieces is, of course, that we're looking at getting transit is getting closer to the airport with the Crenshaw line, getting you to Aviation and Century Boulevard. Now tonight, Roderick's going to talk about, I imagine, what could be happening if we got transit down a little further to the South Bay, if you're touching upon that, and what would happen without an interface of the Green Line extension, which is once called the North Coast extension, and what will happen with a potential people move with Los Angeles World Airports. So without giving background bios, if you guys will tell a little about yourself, then we'll start with the presentation.
Oh, okay. I'm Roderick Diaz. I'm the Director of System-Wide Planning at Metro. I'm the Project Director for the Airport Metro Connector Project. Born and raised in Los Angeles.
I'm Cory Zelmer. I'm with Metro Planning. I'm a project manager for the Airport Metro Connector, working with Roderick. And been in Los Angeles for about 12 years now.
Hi, I'm Lisa Trifiletti. I am relatively new to the airport. I've been there about 3 years. My background is I am a land use attorney. I used to do the planning work for Councilmember Jack Weiss and Paul Corrett for Council District 5. And my role when I first started at the airport was focusing primarily on the land use planning work for land adjacent to the North Airfield, working with Westchester. And my role has evolved, and now I'm working on all the environmental documents for the airport. So I'm not the transportation planner, I want to say, and I'm not the terminal planner, but I am really involved with all the environmental documents and been privileged to work with Metro on this important project.
Should we get started?
Sure.
Okay. What we're going to do is Cory and I will tag team. Actually, it's going to be mostly Cory talking about the Airport Metro Connector and what we're doing in terms of advancing our work, and then I guess we'll transition to Lisa to talk what's going on from the LAWA side. Early question here? No. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. I'm actually going to do a quick introduction to Cory, so I hope the billing wasn't too misleading, but Cory's going to do most of the talk. As Bart alluded, I think it's an important foundation that the Crenshaw LAX line is actually the foundation for what we're going to be talking about today. Some of you know about the Green Line. I'm sure you all know about the Green Line, and it goes, let's say, roughly from Norwalk, which is off the wall here, into this area, stops at a location near Aviation and Imperial, called the Aviation LAX station, and continues down. The secret, or not so secret thing about the Crenshaw LAX line is that it does things to, not only for the Crenshaw LAX line, but for the Green Line as well. So what the Crenshaw LAX line is going to do is it comes up here at the Expo line and then comes down, serves this new station at Aviation Century, and actually joins the Green Line infrastructure and comes down to the South Bay. And so when you talk about the South Bay extension, the Crenshaw LAX line would basically extend up to the Expo line, down, join the Green Line, essentially down to Torrance. Some of you heard us on our early planning for the Crenshaw LAX line that potentially in the future that could get extended toward the Wilshire line as well as up toward West Hollywood or Hollywood. But that's kind of very long term. So you can ultimately see another north-south line through the county, and basically kind of with a nice kind of intersection thing here at LAX. Now, what's happening as well is that the Green Line comes here, and this same connection, just west of, if you ever go to the Crenshaw LAX, the corner of Imperial and Aviation at the station, some of you may see these kind of jut-outs from the aerial guideway. Those are planned when the system was constructed in, I think that's the best that it can be, to allow for a light rail extension to the north, vaguely kind of to the north. And so what we're going to do is actually use those things. And the Green Line will likely, in the long term, well, it will have trains that can go this way and trains that can go that way, but it's likely that all the Green Line trains will go north here to Aviation Central. So whatever the station is, this station has a prominent place within the metro network as a place where two lines intersect, but light rail from three different directions will come. To the north, to the Expo line with connections to the west side of downtown, to the east, to Norwalk, and also to the South Bay. And then, potentially, Lisa talked about kind of north side land uses. There's awareness about potential for something to the northwest, down Lincoln, Sepulveda, maybe the Sepulveda Pass or something like that. Things called the coastal corridor, the Sepulveda Pass corridor. Maybe there's a potential for a connection there. So there's a new intersection of light rail service that, I guess, with the Crenshaw LAX line will serve three different directions and potentially room for a fourth. And the question then is, how do you, given that this is not the airport, how do you get people into the airport? And we thought of different ways of doing that. Do you extend light rail in? Do you just move the station? Or do you basically have a separate system to come and to that intersection? Or do you do some sort of hybrid of those various things? And we did an alternatives analysis last spring. Cory will walk you through a little bit of that. But it's really a vexing question. It's a fun one, but it's kind of very challenging as well, because people always tell us, just do it already, right? But everyone has a different concept of what it is, and so there's a lot of people that have different experience from different airports, and certainly a lot of tools that can use, a lot of models that are there. So that's the important thing to note, and that's kind of where I transitioned to Cory. I did see a quick question.
Quick question, the aviation station, is that about where the Denny's is, and that's in the middle of the hotels?
It's across the street from the Denny's. I think the Denny's is on the east side of aviation, right? Near the travel lodge. It's about, I guess, to be, I guess, where the news
So
is.
you're in the middle of the hotel strip?
Yes, in the middle of the hotel strip. So west of the West End, right where the Hilton is. So it's roughly right there, about a block from the parking spot, around the same place as Walton Park. The Carl's Jr.
Carl's Jr., northwest corner.
So, yeah, take it away, Cory.
Okay. So as Roderick mentioned, over a year ago, I guess it was in 2011 now, our board at Metro authorized us to begin an alternative analysis study to do the early planning work related to an extension of Metro Rail off of that Crenshaw corridor project into the airport terminal areas. So, Roderick mentioned we had a lot of examples from around the world to look at. We started with looking at how other airports made connections and what different modes were used in those connections. And the ones that we really focused on in terms of transit modes were the ones listed here, which is obviously LRT, which is an extension of our existing system. We also have automated people mover systems, which we see at many airports around the world. And we also took into consideration a bus rapid transit option, possibly on an elevated type guideway, to get passengers from Metro Rail into the airport terminals. We did in the AA process, the alternatives analysis process, we did a screening where we tried to narrow down the number of options that we had. When we first approached this question about how to connect the airport, we had over 100 different variations or alternatives to look at. And there were combinations of different alignments, coupled with different transit modes, and different station locations, number of stations, etc. So the purpose here was to narrow down all of those alternatives to a more manageable set of options that we would recommend to our board be carried into further analysis in what we call an environmental review process later on. During that screening process, we had a set of evaluation criteria. We did a two-stage process. The first one was to kind of narrow down the modes and alignments. The second stage was really focused on comparing the different alternatives that remained and how well they performed relative to one another. We show here just some of the measures that we looked at when we were looking at the comparison of alternatives. Travel time, obviously, how quickly we make that experience to the terminals. Reliability of service, passenger convenience, level changes, how often people have to transfer between modes, how many escalators, elevators do they have to take, how far do they have to walk from the station to their final destination. Things like that were considerations in the second stage process. At the end of the AA process, we were able to kind of narrow down the options to a set of 4 alternatives that we ultimately went to our board and recommended warrant further evaluation. The first 2 here refer to light rail transit extensions. The one on the left is what we call a light rail branch. So we're branching off of the main line, which would be the future Crenshaw line along Aviation Boulevard. We would branch off this line somewhere near the vicinity of Aviation and Century, and we would travel west into the terminal areas, terminate there, and then come back out and rejoin the main line. So it's a branch in and then back out. There are a couple different station options that we looked at, both on the way to the airport, right here near Lot C, and then we had different station options within the airport terminal area itself. The other light rail transit alternative, and Roderick kind of alluded to this a minute ago, was what if we actually take the main line and move it into the airport? So essentially we have trains, all trains, Green Line trains, Crenshaw trains coming from Norwalk, South Bay, the Expo line, they would all travel through the airport terminal area and continue on, as opposed to going in and then going back out again. The other 2 alternatives we looked at were both what we call circulators. In one case, it referenced an automated people mover on the left here. And on the right, we looked at a bus rapid transit. They generally follow the same alignments. They're looking at connecting an Aviation and Century where Metro passengers would transfer to this new system. And they would travel along 98th Street, past Lot C, into the terminal area. The difference between the 2 really here is that for the bus option, it may include an elevated busway here, but then in the terminals it can transition to the existing roadway and serve all the terminals similar to how the flyway works today. So these were the 2 other circulator alternatives that we recommended going into the environmental process. Now that was last year. We went to our board back in, I think, April of 2012. It's been a while now. And we presented that information. We submitted the final AA report to our board. And since that time, though, we've been able to start working with Lisa from the airport. She started working with us in the summer of last year, I think it was. And since that time, we've looked a little bit more closely at the different projects that are going on at the airport and how they may or may not tie into the transit alternatives that we are considering. More recently, in December, I guess, of this year, Lisa went to her board of airport commissioners and presented a few proposed connection locations that are related to the automated people mover system that is being proposed as part of the SPA's Specific Plan Amendment Study, which is related to the airport's master plan. Here we just show a few of those connection options. If the red line represents a proposed APM system, and the stars represent locations where Metro Light Rail could connect with that APM system. So the one over here would be a connecting station somewhere on the eastern boundary of the terminals, where light rail passengers could transfer to the APM to continue their trip into the terminal area. A second one would be here near Lot C, where there's a proposed facility in this location. You could have a transfer between Metro Rail and an APM system to then continue into the airport. And the third location would be here at the future Aviation and Century station as part of Crenshaw, where all passengers would transfer here to an APM system to finish their trip into the airport terminal areas. Lisa's going to talk a little bit more about those options in just a few minutes, but we actually took these options to our board in January to inform them of some potential locations that the airport had identified, and that we were going to work with Lisa and the airport to explore the opportunities associated with these three locations. So right now we're in the process of responding to new information. So since the summer of last year, we've been able to work with Lisa, and we've been able to identify new information related to the different projects in and around the airport. An intermodal transportation facility, a consolidated rental car facility, where certain terminal improvements may be occurring inside the airport. All of those are important projects in terms of how we kind of weave a transit system from Aviation Boulevard into the terminals and make best use of connections to these other transportation facilities. So right now we're confirming some of the assumptions about those airport facilities that are related to the master plan and the specific plan amendment study. We're reconsidering some of the light rail alignments, mostly the vertical profile of those alignments, whether we're at grade, aerial, or primarily underground. We're considering those in more detail. We're also discussing more about the automated people mover system, the APM, and the airport's commitment to such a system and the extent of such a system. How the alignment would work, some of the cost details associated with that. We're working with Lisa on those. And then again, we're looking at the proposed locations and how an interface between Metro Rail and APM might happen at those 3 locations that I showed earlier. As we move forward, we want to update the alignments that we originally presented in the alternatives analysis process based on the new information that we gathered from working with the airport. We want to work out a little bit more of the operating configurations. Roderick mentioned there's a lot of different lines coming into this project. We have coming from Expo, from Norwalk, and from South Bay. Potentially a 4th that would be introduced at a later time. So how do we develop a project that can accommodate those different operations to those different locations, while also still providing an opportunity for a 4th operation in the future? We're refining our cost estimates some more as we change our alignments, as we look at connections at different locations that we previously considered. We need to reconsider some of the costs associated with that, mostly on the capital cost side. And we're also doing another look at the performance assessment. So we're changing some of the characteristics of these alternatives, the way they operate, the way they connect with transfers to other systems. So we want to go back and look at some of those evaluation criteria, that I presented earlier, such as number of transfers, passenger medians, level changes, overall travel time, things like that, to better understand how these updated alternatives may perform relative to one another. And as we go forward, we'll continue these technical studies at the airport. We eventually want to move in, once we refine these alternatives, we want to work together to move into an environmental process. Doing that means coordinating with LAWA. It also means coordinating with FAA and FTA. Because we are proposing projects that would be potentially on airport property, we need to make sure the Federal Aviation Administration is involved and understands the characteristics of such a project. And then FTA as well could be a partner in that process as a sister agency to FAA. We're also, on a side, another department here at Metro is looking at the potential feasibility of a public-private partnership venture that could help fund a portion of this project. So our joint development group here at Metro is looking at the potential of that possibility coupled possibly with other projects that Metro is looking at currently. And right now, the revenue operation date that we can identify is only the one that we show in our long-range transportation plan, which unfortunately is 2028 right now. That's tied to many things, but Measure R is one, and kind of the phasing of funding that's associated with Measure R. This project, as you might have saw earlier, is allocated $200 million as part of Measure R. Obviously, $200 million is not going to get us to the airport. So we will need to work on other funding sources and funding partnerships with the airport or other agencies to identify funding necessary to complete the project either by 2028 or sooner, let's say. So that concludes my part of the presentation. I'll switch over to Lisa.
Well, I'm not sure how many of you are aware that the airport is going through the specific plan amendment study. Are many of you familiar with that? Okay, so the airport is undergoing a major modernization campaign. You see Tom Bradley International Terminal being developed and added and being redeveloped. We also have, new central utility plant that's going to come online. As I said before, I'm part of all the entitlements for the airport. A new midfield satellite concourse facility is envisioned as part of the master plan, and we're underway doing the environmental planning and processing for that. New maintenance facilities, new ground I'm telling you this because of the magnitude of what is happening and the transformation that we envision happening to bring that LAX into what, to the premier gateway airport that it really should be. I wanted to give you the picture of that because all of that work, terminal planning work, airfield planning work, looking at how to, the specific plan amendment study right now is making its way through the city approval process and the county approval process. That study contemplates reconfiguring the North Airfield complex to allow for a centerline taxiway, which is like akin to a left-hand turn pocket between runways, because the FAA is saying we need to plan for a safer airfield and for the largest planes. All of those things are being done with an eye toward how does that impact your north terminals. If you notice the Terminal 1, for example, does it connect to Terminal 2? So if you're at Southwest and you have to change and get out and you have to go out on the sidewalk, go back through security and get back in. Well, other modern airports have connections between their terminal facilities that once you pass through security, you don't have to go back out and then enter and go back in. So some of these things, I'm giving you the broad picture because that's the kind of magnitude of work that we need to take on at the airport. And understanding how to plan for the best infrastructure at that airport, bringing in better concessions. I know you've all gone there and they don't have good concessions, better terminals, better ground transportation plans. For example, we have a ton of commercial vehicles that go through our central terminal area that fight and weave in and out with people just being dropped off, passenger, personal occupants. So private vehicles. That's the kind of thing we need to solve for, not just from how do we better work and coordinate to get transit, how do we just make that airport a better working airport in general for all of our users, and what facilities need to come online off airport. Consolidated rental car facilities. That's one of the things that we have rental car companies all throughout Century Boulevard. We need to consolidate that, and we have the opportunity to do that with this specific plan amendment study. We're not just looking at reconfiguring the North Airfield, we're looking at how to have a better ground transportation program that solves for our congestion, that gets commercial vehicles out of the central terminal area and consolidates those in a centralized place, that brings forward an automated people mover system like major airports have that connect our terminal facilities, as well as connecting out to our transit. So I wanted to let you know we are working hard on all fronts to improve the airport, and doing so with an eye toward having a light rail have a seamless connection to the airport. I wanted to give you that because over the last couple of months, we have engaged with technical experts that have built these systems throughout the country. So we're working with folks that did the Miami Intermodal Transportation Facility. And we're working with folks that worked on Phoenix Sky Harbor. We have transportation experts that are helping us think through. And again, we're just starting to really get down to a level of detail that if you're going to ask me a whole lot of questions, I may not be able to answer satisfactorily today, but I just wanted you to know this is the kind of work we're taking on. We've worked with, over the last year, these guys are sick of me. It's been like 40 meetings. We've worked with them to really try to hammer out what are the Metro's plans and how do those jive with our future plans for the airport. This intermodal transportation facility, I kind of skipped to a okay. So this intermodal transportation facility is a location where it's about a half a mile outside of the airport, where we believe that just for airport needs, we need to have a location where we can consolidate all the commercial modes so we don't have so many buses, and as our passenger levels grow, we need to solve for the congestion in the central terminal area. So this intermodal transportation facility is going to be a location where we envision having our flyaways, our rental cars our ride share vans, our Culver City bus line, Santa Monica bus line, all of our commercial vehicles being able to meet at that facility there, and then link up to a people mover system to the rest of our terminals. We also in SPA included a consolidated rental car facility and off-airport parking at Manchester Square. And that is something that, let's see, pull back. So that's all part of this specific plan amendment study where we're going to be getting the entitlement and hopefully going to get approval through City Council sometime in June. But let me go back to the alternative that Cory had touched on. Well, the airport welcomes and wants light rail to connect to the airport. The idea of having all lines, a trunk line come through the south airfield and tunnel under the south airfield was a pretty critical concern, because that's tunneling under our major infrastructure and the working airfield. And to the extent that it's stopped here in the central terminal area, it still relies on a circulator system to get to transport people throughout our central terminal area. And in this case here, the other alternative really assumes that light rail would be the mode that would connect our terminal facilities. And thinking about the kinds of headways, maybe 2-minute headways, the security concerns we have, looking at wanting to put that automated people mover system possibly over our terminal structure, it's really not appropriate for light rail to do that connection through our terminal area. It's really something that the airport needs to own and operate, and from a security standpoint would like to take ownership of. So we spent a lot of time with our friends at Metro, and that's how we did come up with these 3 options. We could have a better connection here at Aviation and Century, connecting over to our rental car facility here where we would have a people mover system. We welcome light rail if that's not close enough, because it's 1.5 miles away. If you wanted to come to the ITF, which is where we see it really being truly multimodal, and we could be able to have all modes connect there. And to the extent that folks want it to be like San Francisco, again, we're studying operationally if this works, but we are willing to make space available in our central terminal area for light rail to have a station right at the airport itself. What we're doing now is exploring, what are those alignments? Once you get past a certain point, we have all sorts of airspace restrictions, and so really light rail would have to become underground to get into our central terminal area, and we're studying the engineering and feasibility of that. We also know that our APM system, which we've committed to and we're looking to get entitled as part of SPAs, will be an aerial alignment. So if that is an aerial alignment, we need to make sure that we don't have competing systems through the airspace and through our, we have spent a lot of time working with Metro to understand what each other's alignments need to be. Again, that's the option of coming to the ITF. And this ITF, just from a concept, this is a concept plan only, would include parking, structured parking, opportunities for meet and greet. We're looking at our APM. We're looking at circulation in and out. To the extent that we have a passenger processing, if you want to be as if you feel like you're at the airport when you hit this location, when you hit this spot. You can have ticketing, you can have passenger, you can have concessions. To the extent that TSA will allow us to put in baggage and security clearance. So those are the kinds of things that we're exploring to see what's possible at this facility for the ITF. And right now, we're also working with Rob Ball, who's the Crenshaw project manager, to make sure that the station, as it's being designed, really anticipates the APM station across the street in Manchester Square. So we want to make sure the elevator cores are in the right place, the escalators in the right place, there's a platform so you can have an easy connection over to, and we're working right now to make sure all of those plans anticipate the future. So this is just giving you a window into how we're approaching it. I'm also working with the Century Corridor Gateway to LA Business Improvement District, and that includes all the hotels, the office holders, all the property owners there. We had a meeting today. They launched a kickoff where we're going to partner with the city planning department to really understand how that Century Corridor, it's a gateway to LA, how could that be revitalized in a way that you really feel that you're in a gateway to a premier airport. You have a hired office, you have a high vacancy in the area, so we're working on how to make that more aesthetically pleasing, how to have urban design plans, and really reinvest in our surrounding community. And we luckily just won a grant from Metro for streetscape planning. So all of these things are happening together. And I just wanted you to know how we really appreciate your time and working with Metro to make a better airport. Any other questions?
Are you looking at an option of having the APM be within the security framework? In other words, if there's TSA security clearance at the intermodal terminal, then the APM would all be intra-security?
What we need to do now is, now that we've identified that we are doing an APM at all, what we're doing is looking at, would an APM be over our parking structures? Would it be over our roadways? And could it come over on the terminal side? And to the extent, for any one of those options, how do we have a secure car and a maybe non-secure car? And so your question about the secure car, if we can get a secure car, we would love to have that extend out to the ITM. This is the kind of stuff we're studying now. Yes.
Do you have a budget for the APM? Does LAWA have a budget for it?
Well, the budget that's been identified as part of the specific plan amendment study shows that there'd be, it's over about $1 billion
That's for the,
just for the APM and the ground transportation, $1.5 billion for the ground transportation, then for the Conrack and the ITF.
second question, is there any plans to extend the APM to the remote facility?
What remote
The
facility?
future, you said the remote facility.
The midfield satellite
Midfield,
concourse?
yeah, exactly.
So the midfield satellite concourse, so what we're doing now is we have a first phase that we're looking to bring online of the MSC, which would be a concourse facility that could accommodate about 11 to 12 gates. The first phase would be done by bus. So there's a ton of busing happening now on our airfield. You go bus out to our west remote gate. We have an American Eagle commuter. We have a lot of busing happening. But in the long run, we will be having to convey folks out to the MSC through an APM. Is it going to be the same APM? Not likely, because that APM has to go underneath taxiways that accommodate Group 6 aircraft, so it's likely going to be underground. And so we're looking at now, as part of this APM development, where do we put the stations? Where are we going to have our processing of passengers? And where are we going to make sure we have that vertical, so that the APM land side is going to be aerial, and the APM to the MSC is going to be underground. We're looking at all of those vertical circulation issues now. Did that answer your
Yes.
question? Yeah.
You kind of asked the question I was going to ask a little bit. It was about the midfield satellite facility. Do you expect that eventually, number one, that you'll be able to eliminate all those buses that you now have to have?
Are you talking about, that's on the air side?
Down the airfield side,
On
from
the air
the
side.
Bradley terminal to that satellite now, what there is of it. Do you expect to be able to get rid of all the buses eventually? And number two, do you expect that there can be an alternative to the people mover alongside of it in the form of a walkway, or even a moving walkway, for
Yeah.
example?
So the reason I
Other
introduced
airports
myself at
have.
the very outset saying I'm not a terminal planner, I'm not this, I'm not that, because I don't have all the answers. But this is the terminal planning group right now is looking to see, and they're doing some distance benchmarking now to see how you could actually do the walkways underneath our taxiways to make that connection in addition to having an automated people mover system. And the goal is to reduce reliance on busing on the airfield, because it just produces congestion on the airfield when you have a lot of moving planes and baggage and all the other. We probably will never ever get rid of busing entirely, but to the extent you eliminate it and use it only when it needs to be,
It's a
that's
major
the goal.
inconvenience to the passengers as well, is what
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
So the good thing is we've got things happening at the same time, so we're really trying to coordinate with Metro, but coordinate our terminal plan and our conveyance systems all together. Yes.
Thank you for doing this. This seems like a huge amount of progress in the last couple of years where the airport was very reluctant to sort of get to this point. If the people mover goes in, and I think it's a great system,
And it's left.
and
like
it's
a year.
elevated, I don't really see how that would connect with underground stations right at the terminal, because those would be 3 or 4 stories underground. and the people mover would be 3 or 4 stories above ground, and that's a huge distance.
There's
to
so
have
much
to
development.
transfer.
Are you talking about just,
The connection
The
between an
connection.
on-site underground station and the people mover seems really
is
difficult to
this for
navigate.
a light rail station?
Yeah.
I think with any system, there's gonna be a need to transfer, and to think about the level change, you're gonna have to think about the vertical circulation and the placement of the stations. And of course, you'd wanna place the stations such that ideally there would just be a single vertical ride from one platform to the other. We wanna plan that at any of these 3 locations. So at the CTA, we would want to do that and plan the position of the stations. At the ITF and Aviation Century even has a provision, whereas if the airport wanted to, they could locate their people mover station above our station. So there's provisions for all of that there.
It seems like at the transit center and the rental center is an easy connection. When you're in the airport itself, it becomes significantly more complicated.
I think it's more challenging, you're right. That's what we have to, that's what we're exploring now.
In terms of, passenger convenience and access to the airport, would it not be your intention to minimize the number of transfers between the 2 systems? And so my question is, why is there envisioned this, 2 sets of lines going pretty much along the same route, except for going to the rental facility? That was the only thing I noticed that was
So you're saying a light rail being redundant to the APM?
No, I'm actually thinking the other way around, because I'm assuming that there will be greater volumes of people actually on the light rail coming from other parts of the city. And
Well, we have a need, the airport has a need to serve our facilities, including the rental car, and the kind of service we need to deliver, especially to deliver passengers to the terminal facilities within 2 minutes to catch flights. It's at a different level. So we have a commitment, and it's our vision to have it be our airport system and the people mover system to connect off airport facilities like our Conrad all the way through to our terminals.
But why wouldn't you be trying to work together to consolidate them so you can better use whatever limited funds you have?
That's exactly what we're doing.
That's what we're doing now. In the past, we looked at kind of an either-or scenario, where we're looking at APM or a light rail system. Here, we're at a situation, we're looking at how does a combination of the 2 work? Where does redundancy succeed? Where does it kind of have some hang-ups? So that's where we're going right now, to see how much we can extend light rail coupled with an APM system that serves all the airport's needs. So that's part of the process now.
I had another related question, which was, almost all the activities along 98 in the back, not on Century itself. So what is the purpose of the TOD planning that is being intended for Century Boulevard? Why would the TOD be important if all the activities on 98?
Well, the TOD planning is actually going to be as part of the whole district, not just Century. It's Century to 98th Street to 96th Street up to even our Arvida. So we're looking at all of that area to understand what are the opportunities that we can explore, and including just the aesthetic enhancement along the Century corridor itself. So we're looking at all of it. We own a lot of property in the area.
I had a question about the image that I saw of the potential transfer to automated train at close to the rental car facility on aviation. I was just wondering, you talked a little bit after the presentation about how you've got this big grade difference where the automated train is high up and goes light rail. Is that what you were?
That I think becomes something we need to work through and think through.
Right.
And I think that becomes more of an issue as you get closer to the terminal area, and not as much of an issue once you get.
And I guess the reason why, I like this idea as far as being able to transfer, but that doesn't look quite as easy. What would look easier would be almost a cross-platform kind of transfer. And if there could be some kind of I know this is pie in the sky, but some kind of a structure over aviation where you don't have to worry about being inside the lines. I mean, this is the airport it's talking about. You can think holistically here. It'd be great to see a cross-platform option where the door is open and you can just kind of walk across. That's just my 2 cents, but
We appreciate
that's
that.
a lot of elevators. And I'm very mobile and agile right now. You know those are going to be the slowest elevators in the world in these MTA stations.
And we're having to take into consideration these, a lot of air passengers who have luggage, so. But, transfers and level changes are obviously more of an obstacle when you're carrying luggage.
And obviously, kind of the configuration will depend on, how Lisa's planning in terms of when they actually devise the alignment of the ATM. If it comes from 96th down, okay, this might be it. But if it comes 98th down, there might be an opportunity to put the station above the light rail station there, and maybe you get rid of one vertical transfer. So there's different opportunities, and that kind of are dependent upon the alignment decisions.
And for whatever it's worth, I mean, these are just, we have so much work we have to do, right? We're just more on the same page than we've ever been, and the airport has never come out and committed publicly to what they're going to do at Manchester Square, to envisioning this. I mean, they never had even the big picture. But we've got the big picture, and now we have all this hard work that you're raising. That's exactly what we have to do.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of disoriented. Where's North and South Florida? Where's Century Boulevard Aviation?
Century Boulevard is here, Aviation Boulevard is there. So Aviation is the north-south. The Crenshaw, LAX, and the Green Line are running north-south at this point.
So the airport is on.
The airport is
Off to the left.
The intermodal facility and the rental car facility, they're separated. Is that primarily by consideration of just sort of land availability, or?
I think that the intermodal transportation facility is really right outside the airport, and we don't want to send all of our commercial vehicles backwards away from the airport to then get to the airport. So it's really a central spot where we see that consolidation should occur. And the amount of land we need for the Conrack, that's the rental car facility, believe it or not, that takes up so much space that we need at Manchester Square that we don't have the amount of room available for us, especially when you have the garage and all, if we're really going to consolidate all of that, then we really need all that property. Yeah.
I was just wondering about the, not speaking to the light rail part of it, but more about the APM. Have you considered just having, I guess a APM type system where you have one loop that brings people away from light rail into the actual airport area and brings them to the terminals, and then kind of how Atlanta, Jackson Hartsfield Airport, what they do is they have a second people mover that moves people within the clean zone, from terminal to terminal. That would be kind of a great thing for people who are transferring from, if they use multiple carriers or.
Two APM systems?
Basically, yeah, they have.
One that links out to the off airport and one that.
Yeah, one
That
brings.
just connects terminal?
Yeah, one connects all of one of them connects the actual transit, the city transit system to the airport, and then there's an internal one that kind of moves you around inside of the airport.
I think it sort of builds on your question. If we brought light rail all the way to, let's say, the front door of the airport,
Yeah.
and then we just had an APM that.
Okay,
went
yeah, so
within
just
our
one.
terminal. We're looking at how we can mix and match. The issue is that once we build the rental car facility out at Manchester Square,
Yeah, it's
to be
consolidated.
able to serve them in rapid fire the way all other airports do, we
Exactly.
really need to have an ATM system that's pretty quick. And if we can, that's why we envisioned the APM going all the way out to
Okay.
Manchester Square.
Wouldn't, if the APM was above the
Yeah.
existing driveway,
Internal.
wouldn't that require that it's a non-secure network? And if it
No,
was
there's-
behind,
What is it?
it would be a secure?
We have, and again, I'm not the expert, but we have folks that built the system, we're working with Lean Elliott and Log Plan, and we're talking with other consultants, and probably have to do a procurement. I know a lot of you are, your procurement to bring the right planners on the team, but there's ways to do the secure, non-secure, whether it's over the parking garages or the terminals. So we're looking at both opportunities. I mean, on some level, to have the APMs be on the terminal side, it lends itself to having the secure side much easier. And if we're gonna be rebuilding the north terminals anyways, we're gonna be rebuilding, we can do all of that with an eye toward how that, it's just that when you start going onto the south side, those terminals are already built. And so we're really trying to evaluate the cost and the trade-offs between doing that versus going over our parking garages. Yeah.
What's being done together with the physical planning to think about the financial planning? What sorts of work is being undertaken? Obviously, knowing that there's going to be a substantial funding gap from what Measure R provides and what the airport revenue could support. So how are you structuring?
We're gonna have to do a
financial-
procurement to bring in that kind of a specialist, exactly, but I mean, we have started even just in terms of life cycle cost analysis, really trying to understand our phasing plan, not just from what our infrastructure needs are and how we're solving for our congestion, but what can we financially afford and where do we, so we've started that, but we haven't got very far.
You're doing a study this upcoming.
Yeah, we're gonna do a study on all of it. We just started even, the airport thought it was cheaper to just run buses, and not build a people mover system all the way out to Manchester Square. But then when you start really looking at it, not just from the congestion perspective, because the more buses you're starting to run, you're not solving for the central terminal area, but when we started looking at just the O&M costs, so we're getting into that, and we've educated our
So the
members.
answer is yes, you're looking at life cycle, not just capital.
Absolutely, life cycle cost analysis, just scratch the surface so far.
I'm back over these automated training.
No, I can't even believe it, no, we have folks that work on these, that are with that part of it.
I have a question here. Since Michael pointed out about life cycle and some costs, what you've got is two different systems. You've got the automated people mover system, which essentially is a contained guideway, and you want that system to be self-sufficient from the Metro Rail system for security purposes and all. I'm looking at cost effectiveness and all, and whether it's a light rail vehicle from Kinki Sharo or who the current contractor is, that light rail vehicle can be outfitted to have extra doors under a contract option. It could be also outfitted to have luggage racks and less seating, and it can also be outfitted to be automated. The one feature though is that if you had the same gauge and the same trackage, and it could use the same vehicles that Metro has the contract with the current rail vendor, you could, in theory, have an automated system that is the same vehicles. It would be without operators, and the only difference is that you could then have a track that brings it back to the Metro Central Maintenance Facility, where Metro operators or mechanics would pick it up at a certain point after the service day ends and take it back to the Metro facility, and the Metro folks could maintain the vehicles, and then at the morning cycle at 4 in the morning, bring the vehicles back out when you want to run more frequency, and Metro would take care of the maintenance. You wouldn't have to build a second maintenance facility, but that might be a cost savings of probably $200 million in not having to build a second maintenance facility, share the contract with Metro on the vehicles. But I do understand that the airport has it doesn't want to use an over-the-rail green line, Crenshaw line type vehicle, but a specialized vehicle that's operator-free. But the cost savings that could be there is with Metro's central mechanical facility and sharing some costs there. I mean, that would just be something to throw out, and perhaps you guys might comment on that. And I understand why you want to keep it separate. I have no problem with that at all. It's only connectivity to a maintenance facility that would be in commonality with the switch that.
Yeah, I think it's only kind of considerations that moving forward. I don't know if some of you know that there's a maintenance facility that we're planning in this area just north of the Aviation Century Station, planned to a certain capacity. Certainly that could be a consideration that the airport could consider, but I think they have their own needs and kind of their own capacity analyses to do to determine the sizing of the vehicle, and I'm sure they have their own needs as far as kind of where they want, where the maintenance facility can be.
Right, and the maintenance, and where the maintenance facility goes is really gonna be dependent upon where we, how we figure out our first phase too. I mean, so whether we can share that or not, if the first phase is just up to the ITF, we're gonna need to, maybe we'll be able to get to that station, but it's something to consider, and I thank you for your suggestion.
I think in general, we're kind of testing all the limits of this shared environment, whether it be the physical environment, the financial environment. We're still trying to wrap our heads around how far we can take, Metro's contribution to the project, paired with the airport's contribution to the project, and making sure that we can hopefully make whole a solution here in the near future.
So, question. So let's say MTA doesn't bring the station to Phoenix.
It is the aviation center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the APM is still going to.
The APM is part of our specific plan amendment study, and it's part of the long-term plan for the airport. What we are figuring out now is how do we phase it in operationally, what are our financial plans, so we're definitely pursuing that, and the build-out of all of our facilities that we've outlined. It's going to take a lot of work.
Is Metro open to considering the premium fare sort of basis? We're too far removed from that conversation. I mean, many, not in the U.S., but many airport systems, Heathrow Express, and direct connections, or even indirect connections, are a completely different fare basis than standard urban work transit.
Yeah, I think
that on the table?
I think it is on the table. I guess maybe we can think about two different tiers of service. One tier that's not really talked about is, you mentioned the Heathrow Express. That was mentioned as kind of part of separate studies that were done as part of the Harbor Subdivision Transit Corridor. There was a thought about an express service from Union Station, and maybe some discussion about premium fares for that type of service as might exist in Heathrow and Paris, and I guess about to be done in Toronto and Denver, those types of things. There's another example that I guess if light rail does come to the airport, we might think about, let's say, what maybe San Francisco has done with the BART station, where they charge a premium fare for passengers entering and exiting at the airport station. And I know some other systems have done that as well, where there's maybe a different fare for people who use the airport system or get to the airport. We haven't really brought that up to the board yet, because that might be a next step, but as we kind of determine what the alternative is, there might be some discussion of ways to close any financial gaps, and certainly that should be part of kind of the discussion.
One of the things that you should know is Judy Marie, our executive director, has been pretty clear in saying that to the extent that light rail comes to the front door of the airport at our Concourse Zero or our intermodal transportation facilities, the kinds of contributions that LAWA would make, i.e., helping to offset the cost of you know, utilizing our land or building the station because it's on our property. Those are costs that would offset that Metro would not have to bear. So those are the kinds of things we're wanting to explore.
My question was with regards to all the, I mean, it is a strip of hotels. It could become more like Vegas, as you've been discussing, how they're going to, the businesses maybe will develop some more. And so I'm wondering what kind of participation can those businesses, those hotels have in the development of the APM, considering that, you know, if you're arriving to LAX, you can also take the APM to the Marriott or to any of the other hotels.
We're working very closely with that group of stakeholders all along the planning process. In fact, today, that group had a board retreat of the property, of the property owners themselves. A lot of times those folks are just, you know, the office manager or the property manager. They actually have the property owners and the right group of people that are really engaging with them exactly on trying to have them understand what their vision is for the area and how our vision can work together. So we are doing that.
I'm just curious about the consolidation of all the various rent-a-car companies who are scattered around into one area. For example, who, in any one of those cases, who owns the land that, let's say, take example, Alamo Rental on Aviation near Manchester. When they move, are they still going to own the land if they own it at all? Does the airport own that land, or are they going to own it? Or what happens to that vacated property?
Yeah, that's why it's such a one of the things the airport has been doing, and we work with stakeholder groups of just rental car companies and the property owners, and we actually, I believe, collect facility charges from the rental car companies today to help finance not only the facility. We own most of the land at Manchester Square, but we would have to engage in an acquisition of the rental car companies. And that's why a lot of rental car companies are resistant to it, because they own the land free and clear, so why would they want to sell it and move to, I mean, they would like to see that be put off as a very last stop from their financial perspective. But we would have to acquire their property.
Going further the other way, the traditional automobile and kiss and ride access to the airport. There have been a number of major changes proposed over the decades to how that access would be handled. What is the current thinking? What is the range of ideas for that, including maintaining
the master plan in 2004 and 2005 that was approved would not allow personal private vehicles into the central terminal area, and that was because there was a concern that there was, you know, for security issues. That is no longer the thinking. That's not the direction of the airport. There's no intent to prohibit those cars, you know, for dropping off right in front of your terminal and your gate, your terminal. But to the extent that we can make kiss and ride more convenient off airport, like at the ITF or at Manchester Square, and for folks who do not want to hassle with coming in, and they know there's going to be time certain travel, they can get on an APM. That's the vision for the modernization plan for the airport.
And related to that, if I could do a follow-up, obviously parking revenue is fairly important. And other than the people who are willing to pay for premium parking in the actual terminal areas themselves, it's still fairly important to get a fast trip from the parking lot to check-in or vice versa. And how would that be integrated with the people mover and
Have you ever had stuck in one of our parking lots? It takes like 45 minutes to get out because it's really not modernized, and we're looking at modernizing the parking facility so it's easy and convenient, and we rely on that, and we would not replace, so to speak. As part of the Midfield Satellite Complex and its complete build-out, We do need to envision a central terminal processor that may get rid of some of the parking, but we do need all the parking that we have now. It's entirely utilized. It's just not efficient.
With ATM access or continuous bus access or what?
You know what I'd like to do is, better have all the answers there. I'd like to, revisit this group and have Pat Tomchek, who is our transportation pilot, to talk specifically about our parking garages and parking structures and plans there.
Thank you.
Yep.
What's the anticipated daily ridership, and how much of that is employees and hotel destination?
I think that's what analysis.
I think when we estimated ridership last time, I think we estimated roughly, I think a combination of pure transit users, park and ride users, employees. It could add to the system, whatever the system was, somewhere on the order of 15-something thousand a day, something like that. And they obviously vary in terms of the quality of the connections and things like that.
I'm not really asking how many would add to the transit system, how many would be on the people mover?
Yeah, I mean, that's
Just
like, I guess.
50,000 seems really small. Didn't you say you had 50,000 employees?
The airport itself has around 30,000 to 40,000 employees, but they don't all go to the people mover into the terminal. I mean, the complex, the airport property is 3,650 acres, and there's people that access all kinds of facilities on the airport property. So,
The ATM wouldn't serve all
yeah,
employee
not everybody.
destinations.
I mean, it also determines, like, if you really forced everyone, and if that was the only conveyance into the terminal, that would bump it up a bit more. But
If it's a superior experience,
Yeah.
we want to get as many people as possible.
Yeah, that's what we're planning for, is for ridership.
Notice there's a junction, there's a couple of junctions missing here. Of course, we can't see this one down here, but then right up over here, if you're gonna bring a line into the airport, it should split off right at about this point and curve this way. Just like the other one would curve up, going up this way, that way. Anything going down or up will have to stop at that station before it goes into the airport.
let me call up that other presentation. What you're referring to is at
Right
this
there.
station, there would be a need for a junction that kind of follows the south side of the maintenance facility. That splits off from this main line at Crenshaw. Then that junction could either serve, let's say, light rail going into the terminal or even light rail going up the coastal port. So we are working through kind of the details of this junction and kind of how that works with the yard entrances and kind of leads to the yard. There's some complexity there that we have to work out. But yes, there's a junction here and there would be a junction there under all scenarios.
Actually, the junction should be right at the station, because then right up here, you're always gonna get passengers who are gonna wanna go these stops
Because
before.
the amount of space that you actually need before you start a junction is actually,
Yes.
there's a good curve, and especially if you want to grade separate the junction for faster operations, it requires a little bit more space. I mean, this property actually follows an old railroad line. You can imagine. There were
Just one last question, not related to this, but I mean, not able to answer it. Is there any plan to extend the green line to the Metrolink LAWA station?
yeah, that's part of a separate project. It's part of, there was a cleared EIR for a project back in 1994. But since then, that project, it's part of the Metro, called the strategic element of the long-range plan. So it's not a funded project right now. Eventually, if the board decides to bring it into the funded element, it's a concept.
Okay, can be survived. Okay.
In terms of transportation demand management, is there any consideration of a toll on private vehicles in the central terminal area?
There actually is, there's a desire to look at exactly that congestion pricing for folks being out, to encourage them to not come into the central terminal area, or to charge, maybe certain commercial vehicles like limos and taxis to a higher level to handle this, to look at that. There's all kinds of things under exploration right now, single level busing, consolidation, all kinds of tools that we need to, flipping the curves. So all of that is in the mix for analysis right now to help really solve for reducing the congestion. Right now you have, I believe, the commercial vehicles on the outer side and then the private cars coming in. So to the extent we can switch some of that up to understand how to deal with it, because it's the weaving that's causing a lot of the problems. So we're looking at all of that to handle that, including your suggestions.
Lisa, do you have to leave for childcare?
Yes, I have a problem. I've got 2 kids at home and a nanny's gonna leave at 9 o'clock. So
Well,
I think it's gonna be able to.
we don't have to stop the meeting if Roderick and Cory want to answer the questions in your absence.
Yeah, I
We don't
just
want
wanted
the
to know
nanny
if
to
there's
be,
anything else that you have any questions for me, but I'm gonna.
I can help answer the guy who asked about the Norwalk business and the Green Line. I asked that same question in a meeting about 3 months ago with the guy who was answering a lot of this. He just basically said the city of Norwalk objected strenuously that last 2 or 3 miles from West Norwalk to East Norwalk where it would connect. And there's a history, a bad relationship between Metro and the city of Norwalk. So, just to answer his question.
Yeah, I'm aware of some opposition to that extension.
If anybody has any final questions for me, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time, and we really will be here as often as I can find
Your presentation will email to me, since you have an email.
Yeah, and this is all available online.
We'll put it up on the Transit Coalition website, because people do like to say.
They talked about maybe the possibility of the intermodal system of doing baggage check there. There's a system in Hong Kong where you actually go to downtown Hong Kong, you check in, you give them your luggage, you get on the bullet train, and you never see your luggage. You don't have to worry about it until you get all the way back to LA. And it's such a wonderful system that you sort of finish checking in, and the rest of it is just a Disneyland ride playing instead of like dragging all your luggage all over. Is that a real possibility at that place?
That's really for them to answer. It is, well, let's see, I observed some trends, and the remote check-in tends to be a feature of the types of systems that Mike mentioned, where there's an express service from some faraway location, because the act of doing all of that takes a lot of effort, and takes a lot of securement of the baggage and all of that stuff. And there does seem to be a trend of some of these systems that have had these remote baggage systems not having them anymore. Such as the Paddington Station used to have remote check-in, and I believe recently they removed that feature. It's possible with a system so close in that they would have it, because then I think I've heard some proposals that have been trucking the baggage to the terminals, but I think there's just kind of a logistical kind of challenge, let's say, and it needs to be thought through. Sorry to be, don't mean to sound evasive.
No, that's a fair answer.
Any other questions? I know Lisa was the hot ticket on that.
Do you think that, I guess there was a time, I may not have the right story in the front here, but there's a time when, I think for 20 years or so, LA World Airports was kind of going for multiple regional airports, and at some point, about 10 years ago or 5 years ago, they changed their strategy. That's at least what I've heard. Do you think that they had the right people managing the LA World Airports, the right people on their board to make all of these improvements gel together right now? Or have you found your interaction with LA World Airports to be much more promising than in years past?
He says not too bad.
Well, I didn't want to ask you that.
Go on, answer
I can answer the question on the record. There's been some major pushing from the mayor's office to move some of these things. For a long time, the airport was pushing bus rapid transit as a solution, looping the airport, not rail. The mayor's office has been pushing on the level of Borja, heavy pushing. So you do have that support. However, on July 1st, the new mayor takes over. Next Tuesday, for those of you that live in the city of Los Angeles, you still have an opportunity to vote between now and next Tuesday, not often, but once. And there will be 2 folks named on Wednesday that will be in the runoff unless somebody gets 50% plus 1. So that individual person has, depending on who the mayoral candidates are, has consented to certain things like the citizens groups that are involved in the airport, rather than moving the runway north towards Westchester, they'd like to see the 3 inefficient old terminals, 1, 2, and 3, torn down, changed into a different configuration, and move the runway south. That changes the footprint. It's one of the alternatives that's there. It's the political pressure between the citizens that live in the area that don't like the policies that the airport have had, and the airport settled with the citizens, and unfortunately the airport pretty much violated all of the settlements. They're supposed to have 15 flyaway bus routes in operation, which there aren't. They're supposed to have all sorts of other agreements that aren't. And unfortunately, the lawsuit didn't have enough teeth in it to cause penalties. The other difference at the airport is that the executive director of the airport is also given notice that when the mayor shifts over, she will stay long enough for a new executive director of the airport to be there. So a lot of the airport is extremely political, and the politics depend upon the mayor, the policies of that mayor, and Metro does its best to fit in to those policies, because there is no politics at Metro, as everybody knows. But on the other hand, Metro is somewhat, I don't know, I would call it a little bit more straightforward than the politics of the airport, where 1 week they want to do a people mover to save money. A bus rapid transit to save money, and now people movers come back. I have seen, from what I see tonight, is at least there's been more effort and more intense effort to see mating of these 2 systems. Because a couple years ago, when I was on one of the committees that we worked with Metro planners and city and all, it was on a different hypothetical level, and things had not moved closer. This is the first time, this is the 2nd year in a row Roderick has been here. I'm seeing things actually moving towards a culmination that will be sensible to most of the folks in this room. So that's at least somewhat of an answer to your question, political or not. He doesn't then have to answer, it's off the button.
Well, I guess I'll say this, and I think Bart has had me to be allowed the time to think about, let's say, the diplomatic answer. I think what you're seeing is a change in the planning environment. And I think the certainty that the Crenshaw LAX line brought as kind of what to do related to Aviation Boulevard, kind of related to the harbor subdivision, brought a kind of a certainty about bringing 2 light rail lines into the area. There's a little bit of certainty related to SPONS and the master plan for the airport. I think actually one of the biggest roadblocks to even contemplating and having a conversation about connections into the airport were this mishmash of a lot of different proposals being bandied about, and kind of this concern about precluding any one of those airport proposals. I think the fact that the airport has completed a planning process related to its master plan has, let's say, given it the freedom and maybe even the urgency to start to address the issue. So like once issues got settled, they may have been able to be more free to kind of talk about succeeding issues that they have dependent upon those things. And Mark also highlighted another idea, though, is that the political environment has changed. And that political environment changes and affects priorities of management and organizations. And certainly, as the political environment articulates itself through elections and new people coming in, there have been people who've emphasized transportation on us and on the airport, and I think that's only strengthening now that we have this greater certainty in the planning environment of what the resources we have available to us are. And it highlights the idea that you, the constituents of kind of action, to push us as agencies, have been more and more strident in terms of pushing for a solution. And as long as you keep pushing for a solution and pressing us for answers and pressing us for action, I think that is actually moving these agencies to some sort of nexus for what might be a solution. So, long way of answering the question, but I hope that kind of clarifies the situation.
I actually thought that was a great answer, just because I bought you some time, but it was really, it's really important to understand that the context of everything has changed. And you know, the years and years that we saw Crenshaw originally from 2001 onward, Crenshaw was supposed to be a bus rapid transit project, and we used to, Transit Coalition, we used to do interesting dialogues with the supervisor's office, because there was a guy that wanted to put automated guideway buses and bus rapid transit on the Crenshaw corridor up to and towards the airport. And our maps in the 2000 and 2005 era showed how that would fit into the light rail system. And eventually, what it was, whether we laid it out first or whatever, the politics finally came along. The community realized that it wanted to have a rail system rather than a bus rapid transit system. And you know, all through around 2001 to 2005, I was quoted in the Daily News like about every week, calling bus rapid transit a third world choice from a second-class choice from a third world country. And I think that it's really fitting that Crenshaw did get a rail line. And you know, we really have the network. I mean, the map that Newman Parada drew on one of our publications a couple, I think maybe last year, conceptually shows the Crenshaw line extending south, going and looping through Beverly Hills, going up to Hollywood and Highland, going into a tunnel under the mountains, coming up in Glendale and connecting to the Gold Line. And you know, those kinds of visions showing a rail line that goes from Pasadena to Glendale to Hollywood to Beverly Hills and following Crenshaw to the airport, that's a big vision. And if we keep, you know, multi-billion-dollar project, but if it accomplishes, there's no freeway that's ever going to do that route. It would be a major trunk line connecting Glendale, Beverly Hills, and Hollywood, and the airport. So, just a few words out there. Any more questions?
It seems to me that the people mover location has to have a final decision on the runways and the terminals, and so and then the connection. So it seems within, we've got a year to make all the final decisions, and then everything lines up and starts moving along pretty quickly. Is that realistic?
Could you clarify what you mean with the people mover decision?
The location of the people mover is dependent on the terminal location. And what you were talking about, you know, maybe instead of doing the runway north, taking out the terminals on 1, 2, and 3, is that even realistic?
Part of the spa. Alternative number what? 5.
Where would they
9.
put the terminals after they demolished them?
It's part of the environmental impact in SPA. It's not a matter that it's all covered in the environmental impact.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the terminal planning, but I think in what I have seen of the alternate plans at the airport, there is still some version of some northern terminals there. And I think the position of the stations are not necessarily dependent upon, I think there will still be terminals on the north side. It's just what the size of them are. It happens to be that the staff recommended alternative leaves the terminals largely in place. And I know that Bart did refer to the fact that some community groups are pushing for a different alternative that calls for a different vision of those terminals. Yes.
Oh, just on that, one of the plans is to create a long terminal, a single terminal that just all the planes would just kind of go in, head in to the northern, And I think also originally that plan relied on that midfield terminal, being built too. So, but my question was more on the Crenshaw corridor because I noticed along aviation, I see they're already doing some preliminary work. They're removing tracks, they're doing some obviously preliminary digging. So I want to find out what the timeline is before, because I know you guys have to get a contractor, right?
Yeah. Right now, the work that you see going on is related to a contract called utility relocation. And so it's kind of removing a lot of old track, relocating some utilities to get ready for the main contractor. The main contractor, design build contractor, is under contract now. Proposals are being evaluated now. And I'm not part of that evaluation team, so that's probably the most I can tell you, the most I know, actually. And there's a desire to make an award. The last I heard was May. That may have changed. Sometime this year, let's say. In time to construct it, I think the opening date, the revenue service date would be 2019. If there's no general questions, I don't know if you're raising your hand.
Yeah. About we have the Golden Pass corridor from the San Fernando Valley to LAX. Where is going to be the terminal for the LAX? Do you know anything about that?
You can talk through a number of possibilities, and maybe we can, I guess,
because like many a lot of residents in the valley wanted from we have the San Fernando Valley transit corridor from eventually to Ventura and Van Nuys Boulevard, and then few more that they wanted from Sherman Oaks to LAX. So I want to know where does this one be squeezing in just to get that terminal?
A little bit quicker. Yeah. All right, let's do it quickly. All of these alternatives actually have provision for a northern light rail connection, and so from here, you would probably take it that way. This one, you probably veer off at the Block C station and turn north. If you don't assume any light rail extension, the light rail would probably still kind of follow that, and Sepulveda would come into here, and same thing with here. I do hear different proposals and kind of, let's say, desires from, let's say, the LADOT with the Western Mobility Study. I know they're looking at this ITF location as a potential terminal. It all depends. There's going to be a major transit hub here, potential, bus facility, metros, buses here too. So it's likely that you'll still see kind of major transportation hubs both at the ITF and at Aviation Century. So possibilities, either way. Yeah.
I noticed that a lot of effort has been placed into bringing light rail to LAX, but what about heavy rail? You could take the extension of the Purple Line, send it right down Lincoln Boulevard, boom, right into the airport.
Certainly lots of possibilities.
The heavy rail has higher capacity, higher speed, the trains are much more comfortable than light rail.
certainly, yeah, lots of possibilities for thinking new systems, yeah.
Well, what happened to aviation station? Because after what this new, like, will the buses be placed? What at Aviation Century or at the ITF or? Because like, right now, because I imagine after this happens, that the current aviation station will be like basically a ghost station, because you have no reason to get off there.
I wouldn't say no reason. I guess there's still some major employers like Northrop and other things there, and potentially you might have some remote operation. But I guess the aviation station, I guess this station down here, maybe people talk about kiss and ride or park and ride. You know, you could potentially drop off and pick up and go in. Yeah, that station will have less prominence as a bus connection. Some of the buses, like Culver City and Santa Monica, may choose to only end there. What this station does is provide an opportunity, rather than having all the South Bay buses come up here, rather than having all the North buses come down here, it does provide for some consolidation at Aviation Century and the other sections. So it all depends on the operators, people who bus Culver City and things like that. I think that's all the questions.
Well, there's still a major employee parking facility right adjacent to the, almost adjacent to the aviation station, just north of it. And there's still employees who may want to use the light rail line at that point. Right now, I don't think they have to pay extra if they want it.
Yeah. So there's some lots of possibilities. Okay. We'll stick around a little bit, answer questions if you're a little shy to ask in front of everybody else. But, I don't know, Bart, if you had a close with the program.
Well, we were going to extend the meeting to 11 like last night, so, because I know there's lots of questions. Bronwyn doesn't have to get home, and Patrick, you know, we're going to have beers at midnight, so it's not a problem. However, since Roderick has consented to hang around to ask questions in private, does anybody have any particular transit questions? And rather than keep the meeting going for another hour like we did the last time, I could either go over a couple of agenda items, or does anybody have any particular questions on the agenda, and I'll cover it. Ezekiel? Do you have a question?
Oh, no.
Anybody else have any questions that you'd like answered? When you ask, I answer, no extra charge. So, anyways, then let's give, for the time being, let's give a great hand to Diaz Cory. Next, Diaz and Lisa. And Bronwyn for putting this together. I think this is like a really fun meeting. I've learned probably, just seeing how this is starting to gel is just really awesome. So anyways, as I said, we could keep the meeting going, but I know a lot of people are either wanting to ask private questions to Roderick, or I'll hang around and we'll